Because of its inhumane nature, African slavery is a known stain on all humankind. But have you ever thought why specifically Africans were chosen for slavery over others? Was it because they could jump higher or stay out in the sun longer? Or was it because there's no one stronger than the African race? Maybe it was, as one American governor suggested, they needed to learn a new trade. Why do you think they were chosen? Leave your reasons in the comments below. As a descendant of Africans who endured the horrors of slavery, I often reflect on the fate of my ancestors. Was it their strength, resilience, or merely a dismissive notion of needing to learn a new trade? These thoughts go beyond mere curiosity. They connect me to a past marked by pain, yet a resilient spirit. In the annals of human history, there exists a dark chapter that continues to haunt us to this day. This inquiry is not just a quest for historical understanding, but a journey to connect with my ancestors' experiences, to acknowledge their strength and resilience in the face of unimaginable adversity. It's a chapter that raises profound questions about the nature of humanity, about power, and about the systematic exploitation of an entire continent. It's a chapter that demands our attention, our introspection, and our commitment to the truth. Today, we embark on a journey through time to uncover the unsettling truths behind one of the most harrowing periods in history, the transatlantic slave trade. But amidst the brutality and inhumanity, there lies a perplexing question that echoes through the corridors of history. Why were Africans chosen for enslavement over others? Growing up, stories passed down through generations taught me of endurance and survival, echoing the spirit of my forebears. Through these tales, I've come to grasp not only their hardships, but also the enduring strength that resides within me. What was it about the African continent and its peoples that made them targets for exploitation and enslavement? Was it the abundance of natural resources, the perceived inferiority of African cultures, or perhaps something deeper, more insidious, rooted in centuries-old beliefs and prejudices? Join me as I delve into the complexities of race, power, and exploitation, unraveling the tangled web of beliefs and justifications that underpin the transatlantic slave trade. From the theological interpretations of the Curse of Ham to the notion of white supremacy, I will explore the multifaceted layers of oppression that shape the destinies of millions. Through history, few narratives have wielded as much power and inflicted as much harm as the Curse of Ham. But where did this tale originate? And what impact did it have on the enslavement of Africans? To understand the Curse of Ham, we must journey back to the biblical story of Noah and his sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. According to Genesis 9:20-27, Noah became drunk and laid naked in his tent. When Ham saw his father's nakedness, he called his brothers to take a look. They refused and covered their father. When Noah learned what his youngest son had done, he cursed him. Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. Genesis 9:24-25. That's how Canaan, son of Ham, and his descendants were destined to perpetual servitude. In Hebrew, Ham means dark or black. This incident is associated with the subjugation of the dark-skinned people of Africa. You should know here that Canaan was one of the four sons of Ham, hence the mark on the cursed dark-skinned peoples of Africa. While the questions as to why Noah cursed Canaan and not Ham remains an intrigue, the other questions make this perception more enigmatic. Why was this curse significant? And how did it come to be associated with the enslavement of Africans? The answers lie in the interpretations of religious scholars and theologians throughout history. The Curse of Ham has been interpreted in various ways by different religious traditions. Some believe it was a literal curse, while others see it as a symbolic allegory. Moreover, in medieval Europe, the curse was often used to justify the subjugation of non-Christians, including Africans. As European powers embarked on their quest for global domination, they sought justification for their actions. The Curse of Ham provided a convenient rationale for the enslavement of Africans, portraying them as descendants of a cursed lineage. Many people, be it from African origins or others, subscribe to this idea. They believe that black people are cursed and that's why they were enslaved. I'm sorry, but I don't subscribe to this idea. Firstly, neither science nor archaeology supports the idea that we come from the Middle East. Even religiously, the question arises why Noah cursed Ham's son and not himself for his actions. There must be some other explanation. So even from a religious perspective, it's not a very strong argument. Besides, why would anyone accept the idea of being a descendant from such an individual in the first place? Secondly, I don't subscribe to curses or magic. Those who sought to rationalize slavery did so by propagating the fallacious belief that white symbolizes purity while black connotes evil. The challenges faced by individuals of any race, be it black, white, brown, or any other hue, are the consequences of the decisions made by the humans themselves. Blaming inherent traits or mythical curses only serves to obscure the true causes behind historical injustices and perpetuate harmful stereotypes. Despite the horrors of slavery, our ancestors preserved and maintained their dignity. They refused to accept the dehumanizing narrative imposed upon them. I will divulge the stories of their resistance later in this video. What we need to realize here is that the enslavement of Africans wasn't an inherent or natural state of affairs. Rather, it was a practice driven by various superficial and rationalized motives. Let's explore the intricate and historically accurate reasons behind why Africans were chosen for enslavement over others. Imagine the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, calm and inviting, separating Africa by a mere stretch of water. With Africa just across the horizon, wouldn't voyaging for enslavement be temptingly easier? As Eric Williams, a noted Caribbean historian and first Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, stated early on, slavery was not born of racism. Rather, racism was the consequence of slavery. While racism persists as a pressing issue in modern society, it's essential to understand that it wasn't the primary driver behind the institution of slavery. Historians maintain that European or American slave traders didn't select African slaves solely based on their skin color, as many factors influenced the enslavement process. Initially, individuals of various ethnicities had an equal likelihood of being enslaved. The key factor at play was proximity and accessibility, rather than racial discrimination. For example, in the Arab slave trade, both Europeans and Africans were enslaved, with Africans primarily involved due to their political and geographical proximity to the trade routes. Similarly, in the Transatlantic slave trade, approximately half of the enslaved Africans brought to the United States originated from regions surrounding the Senegal and the Gambia rivers, as well as West Central Africa. Another significant source of enslaved individuals was Ghana and the adjacent areas of the Windward Coast. But why were these specific regions targeted? These areas offered several advantages for slave traders. Firstly, they had low transportation costs due to their proximity to the coastal trade routes. Additionally, they possessed well-established slave markets along the coastlines, making it easier for traders to conduct their business. Moreover, Europeans were already engaged in trade with these regions for other commodities such as gold, ivory, and pepper. The existing trade infrastructure provided a convenient platform for the expansion of the slave trade. As demand for labor increased in Europe, humans became another commodity for trade, leading to the proliferation of the practice. While racism remains a pressing issue, it's vital to recognize that the institution of slavery was driven by a myriad of factors beyond mere racial discrimination. By confronting these complexities of our past, we can strive towards a more equitable and inclusive future. Economic motivations tend to influence most of the historic steps. Did they play any role in the enslavement of African people? Picture this. Bustling ports filled with ships, merchants eagerly seeking riches, and empires vying for dominance. In this dynamic world of trade and power, was it sheer greed and imperial ambition that drove the African slave trade? And how did these economic motivations shape the fate of millions? As the dawn of mercantilism broke on the horizon in the 15th century, It revealed a world fueled by the relentless pursuit of wealth and influence. Under this economic system, empires strive to maximize imports with a primary focus on securing cheap raw materials, cheap labor, and lots of it. With their pursuit to produce more and hence grow more, the European economies had an exponential increase in demand for labor. And what else could prove to fulfill their unending demand for labor? You guessed it, it was slave labor. From being seen as status symbols to providing utility in various chores, slaves became essential cogs in the vigorously running machinery of the empire. The period between the 15th and 18th century was also the peak time of imperial competition. The European powers clashed in their quest for global supremacy, as nations like Portugal, Spain, England, and France struggled for control over lucrative trade routes and overseas territories. Africa emerged as a battleground ripe for exploitation. But why Africa? What made it such an attractive target for these colonial powers? Renowned historian Eric Williams states in Capitalism and Slavery, the transatlantic slave trade was intricately tied to the economic interest of European empires. Africa's vast human resources and abundant natural riches presented irresistible opportunities for profit and expansion. European powers sought to exploit these resources to fuel their burgeoning economies and assert their dominance on the world stage. What happened was that in the pursuit of economic prosperity, European powers cast their gaze upon Africa, envisioning a treasure trove of untapped resources and labor. Initially drawn by the allure of abundant gold, empires like Portugal and Spain ventured into the African continent. However, their aspirations took an unexpected turn upon discovering another valuable commodity: humans. As agriculture took center stage, the demand for cheap labor surged, and Africa emerged as the prime supplier for the New World plantations. But here's the twist. Black slaves weren't the sole workforce initially. Alongside them toiled white indentured workers, European slaves, and Native Americans. However, as European states grew stronger, they protected their own, making it challenging to exploit European-descended slaves. Additionally, the Native American population dwindled due to disease and death, reducing their availability for labor. Amidst these shifting dynamics, Africa stood out as an attractive hub for the burgeoning slave trade. Its vast human resources and geographical proximity to the New World made it a lucrative destination for procuring labor. Thus, the stage was set for a dark chapter in history where African lives were commodified and traded for economic gains of distant empires. Walter Rodney stated, in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, it would have been impossible to open up the New World and use it as a constant generator of wealth had it not been for African labor. He maintained that there were no alternatives, as the American Indian population was virtually wiped out and Europe's population was too small for settlement overseas at the time. It led to total European dependence on African labor, and that dependence needed to be justified at home and abroad. But where did that need lead? It laid the foundation of racism, the notion of white supremacy, and the intrinsic traits of Black people that were deemed responsible for their continual subjugation instead of those subjugating them. Historian Audre Lorde stated in the book Age, Race, Class, and Sex, Women Redefining Difference, that European powers, faced with moral dilemma of enslaving fellow human beings, sought to rationalize their exploitation of Africans through the lens of racism. They propagated the false belief in inherent inferiority of Black people, painting them as intellectually and morally deficient and justifying their enslavement as a means of civilizing and uplifting a supposedly inferior race. The transatlantic slave trade was a complex and multifaceted enterprise, driven by a convergence of economic, political, and social factors. Why did Africans become the top pick for enslavement? Because Mother Nature thought, hey, these guys can handle anything. Well, maybe not everything, but they sure could handle the climate of the plantation areas and had immunity against the diseases plaguing the landowners and the local serfs and workers. Agriculture remained the most labor-intensive and major economic sector in the pre-industrial era. As European colonizers established plantations in tropical regions, they encountered a formidable adversary: Malaria. The mosquito-borne disease wreaked havoc on European settlers and enslaved Africans alike, claiming countless lives and disrupting the labor force. Another problem they faced was that their labor back home wasn't sustainable. The local workers couldn't withstand the harsh climate of the plantation areas and diseases like malaria. Soon they found the solution in the geographical diversity of African regions. Their dynamic climates and ecosystems contributed to the development of robust immune systems among African populations. The Africans were resistant to diseases like malaria, which plagued European settlers in tropical regions, and hence they became a profitable source of labor. Now, why were Africans resistant to malaria, among other diseases? The origins of this resistance can be traced back to evolutionary adaptations that took place over millennia in Africa. Malaria has long been a part of the continent's ecosystem, exerting selective pressure on human populations and favoring genetic traits that confer resistance to the disease. Studies have shown that certain genetic mutations, such as the sickle cell trait, provide protection against malaria. These adaptations allowed African populations to survive and thrive in environments where malaria was endemic. Historians like Ira Berlin support this premise. Berlin says in his book, Many Thousands Gone, the first 2 centuries of slavery in North America, that the perceived physical strength of Africans and their resistance to diseases such as malaria made them desirable laborers for the harsh conditions of the plantations. Additionally, the geographic proximity of Africa to the Americas made it logistically feasible to transport large numbers of slaves across the Atlantic Ocean. So, amidst the exploitation of African individuals, their biological resilience to diseases proved invaluable to plantation owners, ensuring a steady supply of labor to fuel the lucrative sugar, tobacco, and cotton industries. Another historian, Sylviane Diouf, emphasizes in Dreams of Africa in Alabama the adaptability of African laborers in unfamiliar environments. This adaptability, combined with their immune resistance, made Africans indispensable to the success of colonial enterprises in the Americas. It turns out, even immunity has a side effect, and for the African peoples, it was a grave one. As we reflect on the overlooked role of climate adaptability and immune resistance to the enslavement of Africans, we should also recognize the resilience and the strength of African peoples in the face of unimaginable hardship. This complex interplay between biology, history, and environment tells us that the one thing that indeed was inherent to the African people was their resilience against adversity. Beyond the realm of climate and immune resistance, another crucial aspect that rendered them a choice for slaves was the military proficiency of African peoples. For centuries, African societies developed sophisticated military strategies and combat techniques to defend their territories from external threats. From the legendary warriors of the Zulu kingdom to the skilled archers of the kingdom of Dahomey, African warriors honed their skills in battle, earning a reputation for bravery and resilience. Enslaved Africans with military experience were often prized for their physical prowess and strategic knowledge, making them desirable commodities in the transatlantic slave trade. What if I told you that within the depths of hardship lay an indomitable spirit, a resilience so fierce that it defied all odds? In the shadows of oppression, a flame of resistance flickered, fueled by the indomitable spirit of those who refused to be subjugated. From acts of defiance to organized uprisings, enslaved Africans and their descendants demonstrated unwavering resilience in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Throughout history, instances can be found where the African slaves started uprising against their oppressors. And those uprisings didn't happen in plantations only. They began right after the enslaved people were mounted over ships. Slave owners did everything in their power to prevent their captives from resisting, such as arming themselves, keeping the firearms and cannons in the ships, shackling and torturing their human cargo. But the captives resisted. It challenges the pre-existing notion of docility of the African slaves. Rebellions occurred on at least 10% of the voyages. Although they rarely succeeded, these mutinies did manage to have a broader impact. They forced the slave traders to take extra precautions, which rendered the cost so high that eventually the number of voyages put to sea reduced significantly. However, you should know that not all mutinies failed. One successful slave mutiny happened on the Clare Galley, where the enslaved people drove the crew away from the vessel and landed themselves near Cape Coast Castle on the Gold Coast in 1729. According to historian Eric Foner, in the fiery trial Abraham Lincoln and American Slavery, enslaved Africans employed a variety of strategies to resist their enslavement, including running away, feigning illness, and breaking tools or damaging property. These acts of resistance challenged the power dynamics of slavery and asserted the humanity and agency of enslaved individuals. Resistance to oppression took many forms, including organized rebellions such as the Haitian Revolution, where enslaved Africans in the French colony of Saint-Domingue rose up against their oppressors and established the first successful slave rebellion in history. As we reflect on the legacy of resistance and resilience, we are reminded of the power of collective action and the enduring quest for justice. We can draw inspiration from these stories of resilience that with unity and determination, we have the power to overcome any obstacle. Now, I conclude our journey into the depths of history to uncover the reasons why Africans were chosen for enslavement over others. While delving into this subject, we are confronted with the vast array of complexities and injustices that have shaped the course of human civilization. Yet, amidst the darkness of this chapter in history, there is a glimmer of hope. The stories of resilience and resistance, of courage and strength, remind us of the indomitable spirit of the African people in the face of unimaginable adversity. From the shores of Africa to the plantations of the Americas, their voices echo through the annals of time, demanding to be heard and their stories to be told. It is essential that we confront the uncomfortable truths of our past and acknowledge the systemic injustices that continue to impact the Black communities today. The legacy of slavery persists in the form of racial inequalities, economic disparities, and social injustices that permeate our society. But it is only by confronting these truths head on that we can begin to dismantle the systems of oppression and build a more equitable and just world for future generations. As we reflect on the lessons of history, let us remember the resilience and the strength of those who came before us. Their struggles, their sacrifices, they paved the way for the freedoms and opportunities we enjoy today. And it is our responsibility to honor their legacy by continuing to fight for justice and equality. Together, with unity and determination, we have the power to affect change and create a better future for all of us. Let's stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters, amplifying their voices and advocating for meaningful action to address the systemic injustices that continue to plague our society. In the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it is done. Let us take inspiration from the resilience of the African people and work towards a world where freedom, equality, and justice prevail. As I close this chapter, let us look to a future with hope and optimism, knowing that the power to create positive change lies within each and every one of us. Together, we can build a world where the lessons of history are learned and the mistakes of the past are not repeated. Thank you for joining me on this journey through African history. May we continue to learn, grow, and strive for a brighter tomorrow.